Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of my Gaming Generation series. This video is talking about Generation 2. In 1976, gaming took a huge leap forward with the implementation of microprocessors. You know microprocessors? Those things that have been having production issues and are the reason why you still can't buy a PlayStation 5? Yeah. Those bad boys originated in this era, and apparently are the glue that holds the gaming industry together. This piece of technology made improvements in screen resolution, color graphics, AI processing, and audio. And thank God for that, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to enjoy the Bane from Borderlands 2 to its fullest potential. All jokes aside, microprocessors were perhaps the most important aspect of this generation. They allowed game developers to use interchangeable cartridges to store their games, instead of having each console being exclusive to whichever game it was shipped out with. Generation 2 also saw the rise of Atari with their now famous Pong, and Nintendo's breakthrough into the industry with Donkey Kong. This generation also boosted the rise in popularity of coin-operated arcade machines such as Space Invaders, Pac-Man, and Prop Cycle. Atari, being the entrepreneurs that they are, decided to combine coin-operated arcade machines with more easily accessible home entertainment. Being the lead gaming producer at the time, Atari gained the rights to Space Invaders, which they immediately shoved into a cartridge and shipped out to the world. Space Invaders became the first officially licensed arcade game to come on a cartridge for home gaming consoles, which in turn made it into one of the first ever killer apps. These killer app titles were games that made consumers say, "Forget about the USSR, we gotta get Space Invaders." Soon, many other arcade hits made the jump to cartridges as well, such as Donkey Kong and Frogger. In the beginning of this generation, all games were made by first-party developers. This means that they were all made in-house. In 1979, however, 4 developers left Atari after Warner Communications purchased the company. They decided to stick it to Warner and start their own development team, named Activision. Activision became the first ever third-party developer. This meant that they could create games for whichever consoles they wanted, after paying a licensing fee for each console per game, of course. This model of third-party developers began with Activision and is largely responsible for the success of modern third-party studios such as Rockstar, EA, and Ubisoft. During Generation 2, almost all games and consoles were sold to make profit at their original market value. But the growth of third-party developers allowed console makers to use a razor blade business model. Essentially, console makers would sell their machines at a loss and make back that money, plus more, with licensing fees from third-party studios. This business model, plus the rise of subscription services, is mostly what fuels the gaming industry today. Anyway, back to Generation 2. The massive appeal of having arcade games at your home allowed Atari to dominate the console market, outselling their nearest competition, the Intellivision, by 10-1. The arcade games on the Atari became so popular that everyone and their grandma was clamoring to get into the video game industry, even those who had no experience with the medium at all and were just there to make a quick buck. Keep in mind, this was the late 70s, so people may not have had the most cognition when they decided to make the leap into video games. This, plus the approachability of third-party development, led to an oversaturation of games, most of which were horrible. The amount of quantity over quality eventually led to the great video game crash of 1983, which effectively ended the second generation of consoles. Generation 2 was incredibly important to the development of the video game industry. To put this more into perspective, here are some key titles from this generation and the impact they made on the industry as a whole. Adventure on the Atari was the first action-adventure video game and first console fantasy game. It is considered to be an important role in the advancement of home video games and one of the best Atari 2600 titles. Baseball on the Intellivision was the console's best-selling title with over 1 million copies sold. Donkey Kong, the arcade port, was praised highly for being very faithful to the original arcade game. Many critics considered it to be one of the best ports of the era. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which was released for the Atari in 1982, is often accredited of being one of the worst games of all time. This was before the release of Cyberpunk, if you know what I mean. Some believe the game played a significant role in the video game crash of 1983. Microsurgeon on the Intellivision was praised highly for its originality. It was included in the Art of Video Games exhibit at the Smithsonian Institution in 2012. Pitfall, which was developed by Activision, released in 1982 and was one of the best-selling games for the Atari 2600, selling over 4 million copies. River Raid, also produced by Activision, was the first video game to be banned for minors in West Germany. Despite this, it was still one of the most popular titles for the Atari 2600 and won an award for the 1984 Best Action Video Game. The Space Invaders arcade port on the Atari 2600 was the first official licensing of an arcade game, and it was the first killer app for video game consoles. Its release saw the sales of the Atari 2600 quadruple, and was the first title to sell 1 million copies. And finally, Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back on the Atari 2600 was the first officially licensed video game for the Star Wars franchise. And that concludes Generation 2. A lot of stuff happened during this period that would eventually shape the future of gaming forever. However, before I can get to Generation 3, we're gonna have to venture into a dark time for the gaming industry. It's like the Great Depression, but for games. Depression in video games? Huh, what a combo. Never would have seen it coming. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, subscribe if you're interested, and I'll catch you on the next one.